Make sure you subscribe to our channel by clicking on the red subscribe button. And to never miss another lecture from Miracle, hit the bell icon to get regular updates on English literature.
Hello and welcome to Miracle, English Language and Literature Institute. I am Professor Abha Sharma. In my last video, I discussed with you the knowledge or the important facts which would be helpful to you to crack this UGC NET exam. I had already covered from Elizabethan age to the Victorian age. The Victorian age is considered from 1832 to 1901 when Queen Victoria died. So let's begin the important facts of the 20th century in this video. The very first point, the death of Queen Victoria in 1901 and the accession of Edward VII seemed to confirm that a franker, less inhibited era had begun. Yes, the people were more frank because of the psychoanalytical studies of Sigmund Freud and many other reasons were behind it. So the 20th century opened with great hope, but also with some apprehension, for the new century marked the final approach to the new millennium. Second, many writers of the Edwardian period, they drew their inspiration or say drawing widely upon the realistic and naturalistic conventions of the 19th century, that is Henrik Ibsen in drama, and Balzac, Turgenev, Flaubert, Zola, Eliot, and Charles Dickens in fiction, and in tune with the anti-aestheticism unleashed by the trial of the archetypal aesthete Oscar Wilde, saw their task in the new century to be an unashamedly didactic one. That means the 20th century writers, they drew their inspiration from the above in drama and in fiction. Next, H.G. Wells' Utopian Studies, the aptly titled Anticipations of the Reactions of Mechanical and Scientific Progress upon Human Life and Thought, and A Modern Utopia. These are the two works of H.G. Wells. They both captured and qualified this optimistic mood and gave expression to a common conviction that science and technology would transform the world in the century ahead. To achieve such transformation, outmoded institutions and ideals had to be replaced by one more suited to the growth and liberation of the human spirit. This writer, H.G. Wells, and many others, they tried to shape the society according to the surroundings. Science was developing with great speed, so their writings were also replaced by the modern scenario. Whatever was in front of them, they jotted down or they reflected the same in their novels as well. Next, George Bernard Shaw, with his plays like Man and Superman, Major Barbara, turned the Edwardian theatre into an arena for debate upon the principal concerns of the day. That means he started revealing the inner side of life. Man and Superman imposes the life force theory. So they were not just dealing with the hackneyed topics of the Victorian era or the eras of the past, but they started to decode life more through their work. The question of political organization, the morality of armament and war, the function of class and of the professions, the validity of the family and the marriage, and the issue of female emancipation. That means they were just not influenced by the war. There was no patriotism attached to the war. There was no romanticism attached to the marriage or being an army person. All these set cliches were broken by their work. That means the new century, the 20th century writers, they started to break away the cliches of the past, the beliefs of the past, and they started delving into the things more deeper than ever. Next, fifth, John Galsworthy made use of the theatre and strife to explore the conflict between capital and labor, and in justice, he lent his support to reform of the penal system. Now, Karl Marx studies, that is the Marxism, it became very popular in the 20th century, and the writers, they started using the same to make the society aware of the class differentiation, the labor class, to give their rights to them. So their texts were also based on the same content. Sixth, Harley Granville Barker, whose revolutionary approach to stage direction did much to change theatrical production in the period, dissected in Voice Inheritance and Waste. These were the two works by Barker. The hypocrisies and deceit of upper class and professional life. See, in the new classical age and and the ages after, they were not concerned about the cruelty or the deceit of the upper class, but now the writers were bold enough to project this in front of the society. Seventh, Arnold Bennett in Anna of the Five Towns detailed the constrictions of provincial life among the self-made business classes in the area of England known as potteries. Potteries, the region in the north of geographic county of Staffordshire, England, the country's main producer of china and earthenware. So the novels were based on the potters and the potteries. Galsworthy in The Man of Property, the first volume of the Forsyte saga, described the destructive possessiveness of the professional social order dominated by middle-class capitalists, typically with reference to its perceived materialistic values or conventional attitudes, all based on Karl Marx's Marxism. And E.M. Forster in Where Angels Fear to Tread and The Longest Journey portrayed with irony the insensitivity, self-repression, and Philistinism of the English middle classes. Philistinism means those who are hostile and indifferent to culture, art, painting. So all this change was coming up with the novels, with the writers of the 20th century. Eighth, The Old Wives' Tale, Arnold Bennett, showed the destructive effects of time on the lives of individuals and communities and evoked a quality of pathos that he never matched in his other fiction. In Tono Bungay, H.G. Wells showed the ominous consequences of the uncontrolled developments taking place within a British society still dependent upon the institutions of a long defunct landed aristocracy. And in Harvard's End, E.M. Forster showed how little the ruthless and self-important world of contemporary commerce cared for the more rooted world of culture, although he acknowledged that commerce was a necessary evil. Today in India, we are facing the same thing. The more rooted world of culture is totally ignored with the contemporary commerce. So this you can read in Harvard's End, written by E.M. Forster. Ninth, the new century had begun with Great Britain involved in the South African War, the Boer War, and it seemed to some that the British Empire was as doomed to destruction both from within and from without as had been the Roman Empire. Yes, in the new century, that is the 20th century, British was losing its hold on the colonies. So, American novelist Henry James in The Portrait of a Lady had briefly anatomized the fatal loss of energy of the English ruling class, and in The Princess Casamassima had described more directly the various instabilities that threatened its paternalistic rule. This means the imperialistic rule which was there by the English all over the world. In this work, the instability of the imperialistic rule of the British is discussed. The 10th one, man was a solitary, romantic creature of will, who at any cost imposed his meaning upon the world because he could not endure a world that did not reflect his central place within it. See, man is just a part of nature. He is not the center of this nature, but man is so egoistic that he cannot tolerate a world which doesn't show his position important. So what he does is, through his work, through the various means in his capacity, he shows himself as the main entity of this world. Joseph Conrad, who was born of Polish parents, another expatriate novelist. That means he remained out of his birth country all the time. He also shared Henry James' sense of crisis, but attributed it less to the decline of a specific civilization than to human failings. He was so philosophical novelist that he was concerned with the mocking limits of human knowledge, and was not affected only by the content of his fiction but also its structure. So, in Almayer's Folly and Lord Jim, he had seemed to sympathize with this predicament, and in Heart of Darkness, Nostromo, Secret Agent, and Under Western Eye, he detailed such imposition and the psychological pathologies he increasingly associated with it without sympathy. So, the realism of the 19th century was of course borrowed by the 20th century literature, but they transformed the same to express what is considered to be peculiarly their own work, their own anxieties, their own preoccupations. That means the anxiety and the preoccupations of the 20th century literature, although the same was borrowed from the 19th century realism. To know more about 20th century literature, you have to read the text, the actual text of the novels and plays written by these modern and postmodern authors. Actually, they are not as easy as till the Victorians, because the writing has become complex. The reader has become complex and the writer has become complex. The literary theories are incorporated in their writings. As the development of the science, philosophy, and other fields of life, literature has also become very much complicated, very much different than it used to be in the Victorian or in the Elizabethan or in the New Classical era. So it's not that easy. It cannot be just studied through history books or so. You have to read the actual text. You have to collect matter from so many places. They're not there in the books collected as you find till the Victorian era. So hope you must have liked this video, must have gained a lot from it. So like, comment, share and subscribe. See you again with the next video. Take care until then. Thank you so much.